Welcome back, everybody. Today we are discussing Fallout. This is the second edition to the Chronological series where we dive into a single character's timeline and fully understand what makes them them. This is a fun way to see how the story is constructed and really dive into the nuance that gets passed over when all of the stories and timelines are connected. This video will focus on Lucy, and if you have not seen the first one focusing on Cooper Howard, I recommend you check that one out as well. It covers a lot of the pre-Great War stuff that formed this world, and overall has been one of my best videos in years. I'm hoping for the same with this one, so if you enjoy this, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a comment about any words I mispronounced, politely prose any points that I predict, and overall, sit back and enjoy the nerdiest ride on the internet.
Okie dokie.
Lucy's entire existence and the culture that she grows up in starts with Bud having a dream of diabolical time management. So I want to start with him. He was a senior junior vice president at Vault-Tec after a piss-poor performance at West-Tec overseeing the creation of the faulted T-45 power armor.
Design flaws here has cost a lot of good men and women their lives.
Yeah. Product management was never my bag.
What's really interesting to me is that perceivable piss-poor performance part. He describes his time there like this.
Bud Askins, I oversee the Southern California operations. Yeah, came over to Vault-Tec in Q3 after a 10-year stint at West-Tec.
We know he has a long history at West-Tec and probably started at Vault-Tec within the last year. He says Q3, meaning between July 1st and September 30th. This is likely in Q4 or Q1 of the following fiscal year, because anything else he would just say last year, I believe. So it's a quick line, but it does establish that he is very new to this company either way. And then on the same day, later that night, we get a shot of Cooper reading this newspaper. Now, if you watched my last video, you were likely one of the hundreds of people that thought they could read this better than me. And I think universally everybody agreed that, maybe I made a mistake here. And ultimately agreed that the final digit was a 7, making the year 2077. But then I saw damn near every month ever listed. I think the most popular, however, was either saying this was January or February. Either way, good job, because it aligns to this being in Q1. So it means that around 6 months have gone by before he is somehow making steps for the end of the world. It is weird. And that performance, we only know that it's been bad, right? I don't know how he gets to this position. I also uncover some promotional videos that will be linked in the description below. I did not know these existed until I was making this video, but they are pretty great, and you should go watch them. It's how we know his title is Senior Junior Vice President. It's somewhat of a moronic title that almost reminds me of a hierarchical climb in Fallout baddies, that we have to defeat. Once the senior junior vice president is defeated, we move on to the senior vice president, because that's much more ridiculous and in lore than just like a senior vice president. Then we face off against the junior presidents and then the senior presidents, because now we're getting more serious about the stakes. So they'll never call themselves senior presidents because that's ridiculous, but that's what they are. And then finally, at the very top of the pecking order is Jesus Christ Superstar, to undermine the serious tone and highlight how he truly doesn't give a frick about anybody's opinion and can call, himself whatever he wants, or herself, or themselves. That, to me, is just true power. His ridiculous title and the time served makes me really wonder about his loyalty, and if it lies more with Vault-Tec or West-Tec, being that he worked at one for 10 years and the other for less than a year. 6 months at a company seems like an awfully short amount of time to be working on steps that will be carried out for the next 200 years for the future of the Vault-Tec company, not even considering his legacy of making faulty power armor, and knowing that his master weapon and the ideology that he has to defeat his enemies is time. I wonder exactly when he developed this philosophy. Was it in the last 6 months, or has he been working on ways to defeat your competition for the last 10 years? I wonder if that will come up again in later seasons to create some kind of pretty layered conflict here about who he is actually supporting, now that they have made us all believe that these companies are in bed to end the world. It would be nice to see some treachery that comes along with capitalism.
It was the spirit of competition that made our companies great. Bring that same spirit of competition to our solution.
But ultimately, that is Bud, and he is relevant to Lucy because...
Let's just say that everything about your whole little world was decided over 200 years ago.
Between Q3 of 2076 and Q1 of 2077, he formed this program. The promo video, Bud's Buds, tells us how civilizations come and go like the seasons, and his leadership program is meant to solve that problem and let their civilization live forever.
The basic idea is that the biggest obstacle to achievement has been the brevity of the human lifespan. So ideally, Bud's Buds will keep my project on track centuries into the future.
He believed that time was the ultimate weapon, and whomever could best manage their time would be the people that came out on top. The Bud's Buds program was targeting the exceptional assistants at Vault-Tec, and I want to highlight that because it really feels like Bud thinks that he's training the top brass to manage the world, but I think the bathos of the situation here is that he is actually just training the assistants to the real leaders that will come later in the series. Managers still answer to owners, after all.
Because the future of humanity comes down to one word: management.
At some point, Lucy's father, Hank, comes into the picture.
Hell, this kid used to pick up my wife's dry cleaning.
He was an assistant to Barb, he was an eager beaver, a big fan of westerns, and a downright fool. Him idolizing this line while Cooper himself knew this wasn't a good thing for his character to be doing highlights that morally challenged mindset from the very beginning.
If you could just shoot away in the fucking head, yeah?
It shows us the kind of people that Vault-Tec would need to believe themselves capable of managing the world by themselves, the system, and its ill-fated hubris from the very beginning. But it works, at least at convincing people that are already bound to the company that they will either do this or stay with everybody else dying to nuclear weapons. I think that also speaks to the mindset at Vault-Tec pre-Great War and why Barb made the choices that she did. If you watched my last video, you know that I'm cautious of her, but it seems like it was either conform or die, and I wonder just how many wore a happy smile to hide a sad mind.
And we will carry on until the day we bring that light to the surface.
At some point, Bud's plan manifests as 3 interconnected vaults.
Bud here has an idea for 3 interconnected vaults.
With a large enough sample size of competent leadership DNA that family fricking would be kept to a minimum. We don't have too much information about this period, but I'm assuming they went into the vault early before the bombs went off. That just seems like the proper time management thing to do in order to assure all people are present for the end of the world. He likely handed out gold stars as they formed a single file line in the background, a little bit of shaking as they step into the cryo chambers. This moment would be great to explore in season 2 as they establish how things got to be the way they are. I'm curious when Bud's people from Vault 31 started living inside of Vault 32 and 33 and just how many generations have actually been created. From this shot, we know that Hank went into cryo on the day the bombs went off, October 23rd, 2077. Vault 31 would be the management vault, Vault 32 and 33 would be their breeding pool.
They're our breeding pool, genetically selected to breed with my buds to create a class of super managers.
But otherwise, they were quite normal comparatively. And the idea was after centuries of refinement, they would create perfect super managers for when it was time to repopulate and reclaim the surface. So they called it Reclamation Day, with Vault-Tec values ultimately in tow. The official story is the 3 vaults shared limited communication and resources, and they cite avoiding threats as why they could not freely traverse between the 3 vaults. And I think that there is some truth there, but really what they wanted is to avoid the threat of getting caught, as nobody from 32 or 33 could ever go see 31. They say they offer aid when it's needed, but really the whole system is about having 2 separate systems for their managers to train in and procreate with while they create perfect people.
When you put it like that, sounds downright morally questionable.
Since the purpose of Vault 32 and 33 was to be their breeding pool and training of the next leaders of people, I don't see why they wouldn't have Bud's Buds as overseers of 32 and 33 from the very start. Of course, we don't know for sure, but it does seem like they would. The early days of the vaults could have started with a few Buds in each vault to establish that reverence for always voting 31.
When things look glum, vote for somebody from Vault 31.
so that when it was time for them to switch out, it would be much easier. This is likely what the bulk of the time looked like between 2077 and 2268. Because the cryo chambers can be reused and they stop the aging process, Hank here really could have been one of the first in the lineage, or he could have woken up later in the experiment to oversee the final stretch of this master plan. His and or Bud's DNA being present in damn near everybody alive like he was Genghis Khan has a ton of twisted depth and ties this early period to a despised person we already know going into season 2. But right now, all we can go off of is this timestamp saying he left cryo on August 9th, 2268.
Is this where my dad's from?
You'll never find out. Oh, he's gonna find out.
Around 191 years go by and he is back and walking around, assuming he did not go into Vault 32 first or was not woken up between those times, which is, again, really possible. He was likely traded from 31 in a similarly odd fashion as the breeder from Vault 32 was when it was time for his daughter to get bred. Sorry if my wording is a little off-putting there, it is intended. I mean, these are hardly normal circumstances, and him having a complete picture shapes this as more of them breeding cattle as opposed to a couple deciding to get pregnant. I also want to highlight the insane pressure that comes with this. Like, you are pressured even, to get pregnant or to get someone pregnant. After a few times of what I imagine is very to-the-point coupling, and it not going well, I imagine the eyes start to hone in on you. People asking if something is wrong, them making you feel like something is wrong. That feeling that you're letting society at large down, like you are lesser because you can't get pregnant, or that you aren't fit for your wife because you can't get her pregnant. It's one of the most stressful points in life, and seeing these moments while we learn about what Vault life was like here could do wonders. After about 3 years of being with Rose, assuming the trade and the marriage happened like it did with Lucy, he is elected overseer. 2271 marks the date in which he took this mantle, and Rose was likely Lucy levels of thrilled that her husband came into the Vault and made such an impact so quickly. Little did she know, of course. They do the deed and have Lucy, and then sometime later have Norm. But we know that it is not all groovy under the surface. I think at some point the writing on the walls becomes a little easier to read and Rose starts questioning. I would love if the elections being rigged comes up as well here as a point when she starts seeing, the cracks, right?
I ran once, and then that weevil famine came. Lost to none other than Hank MacLean.
Perhaps when things are looking bad for Vault 31 leaders, they tilt the odds, throw out things that they could only deal with themselves, like an insect suddenly existing in this closed ecosystem. Rose probably supported him as a dutiful wife, but really started questioning the nature of her reality after he just had answers that nobody else could have known. They tell us explicitly that the water thing is really what made her leave, but I have to imagine that it is a buildup of sorts. Like, the rigged elections isn't even my craziest theory about this unknown time, because at the heaviest end of this incestuous vault system that openly talks about cousin stuff, if he was unfrozen in the interim, Rose may be one of his descendants, and that as well could be something that she uncovered. Their relationship could be reframed in a rather damning light, even more so when you consider the implications of Lucy looking so much like her mother.
Gosh, you look just like your mother.
Theories and speculation and all of that aside, we know that Lucy's mother leaves Vault 33 sometime between 2271 and 2277, sometime between the year that Hank was elected and the year Shady Sands was marked for death. I think we can further refine the date that she left, considering what the Great Plague of 77 actually was.
In the Great Plague of 77, everyone had to quarantine. They couldn't work the farms together. People starved, my mother included.
Most likely, no plague existed, at least not one that Bud's buds lost control of. We don't have much more information about this, but this was likely their ploy to maintain control and order. Someone disappearing from the vault is massive. Rose disappeared with her children, and they didn't want anybody investigating or finding out what Rose knew as well. I imagine this entire thing was a ruse to protect the secret, and it could present in a dozen different ways. We know they had to quarantine, to work in shifts, and people died. We can't be sure, but it really feels like this was the year that she left, and they had to create this entire quarantine situation to hide the fact that people were missing. Imagine your roommate that you eat with every single morning, that you are just imprisoned with, doesn't show up to breakfast, right? It's a major event. Questions would start immediately. Also, consider this line from Lucy.
Up until I was 6, I really thought that the big light on our farm was the sun.
Telling us that she was around 6 at the time of being here. I think this aligns to Rose and Hank getting pregnant around 2271, having Lucy later that year. Roughly 6 years go by and we come to 2277. We are told that she leaves because she finds out someone is stealing the water.
Your mother discovered that something was siphoning the vault's water away. She deduced that
civilization had returned to the surface.
But I do still think there is more to that story.
her husband, the overseer, was hiding things.
So it wasn't just her husband saying no, it was the ultimate authority denying evidence, denying science. He probably also scared her, if not outright threatened her to keep quiet. And this, because this dissonance, right, would have become an all-consuming thing until finally they overthrew him. The plan was done, and they just decided to rejoin because they knew people were already up there.
Lucy and Monty's children will be able to recolonize.
Meaning that Hank was tasked with getting them to the finish line after centuries of unified success. It is a stressful position, and we're about to learn just what he is willing to do
To keep the candle of civilization lit while the rest of the world has been cast into darkness.
So Rose leaves with the children, set on finding the source of new life in the world above. We don't know any specifics about her escape, but because of how Lucy leaves, Rose likely had help from someone on the inside that had to stay behind to open or close the door. Depending on how much Rose shared in order to get someone to betray one of their cardinal rules of never opening the exterior vault doors, I have to imagine it was a similar situation as Chet. She may have shared a lot in order to convince whoever this was that helped her.
The hard truth is we can't just let them go. They have intimate knowledge of our vault security.
More than just, hey, I am personally going to find people on the surface. I really think they're up there. Nobody believes me right now. But I want to go see, because it feels like why would you open the door, right? It's kind of a big deal, but it's one that would need more discussion, right? It's not out of the realm of possibility. I'm thinking something along the lines of, hey, I'm escaping this place because of X, Y, and Z with my children who are too small to remember anything. I'm stealing them away from the safety of their home and their father so that I can roll the dice on a wasteland that we have been conditioned to believe is still uninhabitable, because that is somehow safer than staying for me. From the perspective of someone living there who hasn't truly seen anything damning, she is just an unfit mother who is losing her mind, and I have little doubt that is how Hank explained what went wrong to the other buds as the fit hit the shan. The main reason I believe there is more to her leaving than just the water is because of that X, Y, and Z that she would need to sway a gatekeeper. And of course, I just love theory crafting. To me, it seems like she found out more than they are saying. She wasn't just a pioneer believing a theory that people returned to the surface. She was a mother that was taking her children into the unknown. She had something to run from, something that made them less safe here than with her, out in the wasteland. And to me, that's an understanding of what Vault 31 and Bud's Buds were doing here, and how she and her children were basically cattle or a crop to be bred for somebody else's gain. Believing that the doors were inaccessible from the outside, something because that has never been attempted before, she only had one shot to get help. So she had to bring her children because she may never get to enter again.
So she ran away. Like you did, Lucy.
Rabbit holes and theories aside, we know that she does make it to Shady Sands, and she traverses the wasteland to get there. She follows some mama magic and eventually arrives at a sanctuary that accepts her and her little babies. Lee Moldaver and Rose meet at some point and were at the very least very close friends, but my gaydar peaked the second I saw them interacting, and you don't just keep a feral ghoul around because y'all were roommates. All subjective, of course, but whether or not they address this in the show directly, them being gay is absolutely canon for me. She fled an inherently manipulative world that conditioned her to be heterosexual, led by her husband, in which loving the same sex was not only antithetical to their purpose, it may have been frowned upon because relationships that weren't assigned for the ideal genetic coupling weren't, kosher, weren't allowed. Her meeting this beautiful woman that, much like her husband, was wise beyond her years, who embraces her after the trauma of fleeing with her 2 children, and opens her eyes to what true love, support can actually look like, regardless of gender. I mean, that's magical. I think that story highlights how she would need to escape the brainwashing that once told her she could only love someone that she was permitted to procreate with. She could love just because she does. It is a beautiful story as old as time, regardless of the fact that they were both female. And to me, like, them not being gay because of that would be a mistake. To me, it's just a better story. However, maybe it's not to you. It could also just be two women that support and love each other, and equally, I think there's, that's a great story as well. You and the boys, right? And maybe you touch tips sometime. I don't know. However, Moldaver did not care enough about the children to go after them once they were taken, and I think that is also worth considering. Why, if this is ever talked about. Either way, their life at Shady Sands is still largely a mystery, so speculating is all that we can do right now. The show reveals in episode 6 that Shady Sands was founded in 2142. The Fallout Bible tells us that it was founded by dwellers from Vault 15, which opened in spring of 2141. There are some conflicting reports based on the Viper's design doc that says they left the vault at 2097, but this was from a different version of the Fallout Bible, and the concept never made it into the game. Even so, many people say this vault opened in 2097. I just don't think it really matters for the scope of this video. Right now, I'm considering Shady Sands being founded in 2142 by the people that left Vault 15 in 2141. Vault 15 was designed to be overcrowded. It was, that was the purpose of it. It was a very diverse group of people and cultures. Lee Moldaver existing in the post-Great War timeline needs to be explained, and if she was from Vault 15, this could have a ton of depth and also align with kind of what her character is right now, and I think what she is hoping to create in a socialist New Republic society, right? I think ultimately that is the spirit of Shady Sands and the New California Republic, which was founded in 2189. The New California Republic is an interesting organization, and in the show, they are really displayed as the people doing the actual work that Vault-Tec was hoping for when it was, when it was time to resurface. Its history escapes the scope of this video, but from our perspective, Lee Moldaver represents the faction leadership. She is powerful, she is making moves, she is acting and ordering seemingly on her own accord, and for all I care, she's the boss. 9 years after the city was founded in 2198, Shady Sands becomes the capital of the NCR. And then 43 years later in 2241, the NCR becomes the largest power in California. It's a really interesting line when you think about what that means, about how the NCR would do this and who decides this. Did everybody just move in together and agree to politely build up? Did they have great policies and programs to support struggling people? Were they able to lift each other up until they could hold their own against other factions like the Enclave? In short, yes, exactly. In 2205, we see them implement anti-discrimination laws protecting ghouls and mutants from harm as long as they aren't harming. In 2241, the same year that they're deemed a superpower, they are offering other factions alliances and unification. The history paints this picture of them overcoming hardships, unifying states, and really trying to recreate a peaceful civilization. In the same amount of time, the Enclave tries to create new versions of power armor, tries to turn death claws into their own personal weapons, and enslaves people for hard labor. Also in this time, the Institute develops more strains of the forced evolutionary virus, something that also requires its own video but is responsible for mutants and plots of genocide. The NCR, operating out of Shady Sands, was doing its best to establish morality and civility in the apocalypse. It was succeeding through its openness and its accepting nature. It was gaining power and stability. Like any system, it wasn't perfect, and it certainly had people on the inside messing shit up, but it was everything that Vault-Tec hoped to create, and it was being done by the people they once called communists.
Because when we are the only ones left, there will be no one to fight.
This, of course, brings us to the fall of Shady Sands. Rose and her children were living in this prosperous world, roughly between 2277 and 2282. Not that they were there the whole time, but sometime between there is when they were living there. She found her people, she found her community, her support system. She was safe, and then her ex-husband tracked her down.
But then her husband came after her, and when she decided not to return home,
He took the children, and he burned that city to the ground.
He stole back the kids and had a sanctuary that challenged his company's supremacy destroyed. It was personal, no doubt about it, but he is a company man. Rose was left behind, and sometime in the early 2280s, Vault-Tec launched a nuke to take care of the competition while they planned for their own reclamation day many years later. The board here gives the impression that the nuke went off in 2277, but really it's highlighting the beginning to the end, the fall of Shady Sands. They have come out and said that the nuking of Shady Sands happens after the events of Fallout New Vegas, meaning sometime after 2281. Most people are citing 2282 as the year that the nukes dropped, though we just know that it's after 2281. Maximus was living in Shady Sands at the time. As a child, he was able to survive by hiding out in a refrigerator. He lost his entire family. Rose, on the other hand, was not so lucky. She lost her entire family and was safe enough to avoid the direct blast, but was well in the effects of radiation. It's not known if Hank's nuke was actually the cause of her ghoulification, but writing-wise, making it another off-screen event would be a mistake. Moldaver survived seemingly unharmed, but Lucy's mom may have had a slow crawl to complete virility. I think that's why learning about that process and having sympathy for ghouls was a big cornerstone in Lucy's timeline. We and she are learning about this mechanic so that they don't need to explicitly say Rose's misfortune. We can just infer just how terrible it was when Lucy comes to realize the same. I imagine them having some days of hope and other days with none, wanting to covet ideas of a cure while the world spinned on without. I imagine Moldaver sticking by her through this time, though again, we don't have any notes about Moldaver trying to rescue Lucy on Rose's behalf. Perhaps they knew the Pip-Boy was the only way to access the vault again, and the reason they waited so long was because they had to find it. No real proof of any of this, just trying to figure out what Moldaver and Rose's time together after, the nukes went off and she eventually becomes a complete feral ghoul, what that actually looked like. Rose was forgotten about as Hank and the children were once again, quote-unquote, safe inside of the vault.
I did what was necessary to save our people.
All in all, Hank returned with Lucy and Norm sometime between 2277 and 2282. I believe he and the other Buds did a ton of damage control after he returned. He was likely able to open the vault without assistance because we learned that Rose MacLean's Pip-Boy was used to open Vault 32. Going back to what we speculated about with the possible gatekeeper helping Rose escape because someone would need to open or close the door like we saw with Lucy, I think once Hank got back, they will also probably be taken care of, if they existed at all, along with anybody else that Rose may have influenced while trying to wrap her head around people living on the surface. I mean, that's kind of a massive thing. While the powers that be were ultimately reducing her evidence and nobody was listening to her, I have to imagine she wanted to be heard at some point. Their peaceful society was threatened, and it may have just been Rose, but perhaps they had a few dissenters. Depending on if anybody helped Rose escape the vault or not, this encounter may have been much more brutal than just them covering up the MacLean family missing for a little bit. They created an event to invoke fear and make people stay inside. They could have killed any number of people to get what they wanted. They could have moved people from vault to vault to keep them from talking to each other and just saying like, hey, we don't have the resources here, but Vault 32 does, and, letting them exist over there, well, where they can't ultimately tell anybody what this conspiracy was, or if they did, nobody would believe them. Anything is really on the table here because, after all, when the ends justify the means, what does it mean to be evil?
I know we're all hurting right now, but our first priority has to be to maintain the security of this vault.
Lucy and Norm are then back in the vault, and depending on how long the Great Plague of 77 lasted, that could have shaped life drastically for a little bit, months to years even. Eventually it does end, and people start learning to live together again, like the final anxious months of COVID being in the limelight. Assuming Lucy is 6 because of the line earlier about remembering the warmth of the sun until that age, she returns in 2277, and the main storyline happens in 2296. This makes her roughly 25 years old, and I think that aligns perfectly with the general age range that they are displaying with this character. The only other thing to add is that she did 10 years of cousin stuff.
After 10 years of cousin stuff, I'm definitely excited for the real thing. Hello, Lucy.
Which, as someone who grew up in Texas, I think that tracks. Lucy and Norm have relatively normal lives, believing a story about their mother passing when they were eventually old enough to question it. The other buds knew exactly what happened, well, at least the ones in Vault 33, because Barb here helps keep the lie alive.
When my mother died, what happened to her, Pip-Boy?
It was buried with her.
How are you so sure?
Because I buried her myself.
So whatever the plot was, it was known and upheld with continued manipulation and probably moving people around when it pleased them. This was the inherently predatory world that Lucy grew up in despite having little knowledge of its danger. We know the people responsible and seemingly the extent that they will go to get their way. We know that her positive disposition and can-do attitude is not a product of herself, but drafted into existence as a way to create super managers for the world. She is a bright, shining smile manufactured for a world that her father soured. She doesn't know it yet, but she is still on course, like everybody else from Vault 33, to rule the world for the people that destroyed it. Right now, it's still in the testing phase, trying to solve moral dilemma and trolley problems, trying to understand how to treat someone who has wronged you, and failing to do exactly that, like we do now. Bud is alive and overseer of Vault 31 throughout Lucy's life, and I think since the start of all of this. He is not able to take his finger off the pulse and allow his 200-year trained management team to continue without him, which is just such a great way to highlight his bad management style, inadvertently corrupting all of their efforts instead of churning out the beacons of light and truth that they want.
I am the overseer here. My orders must be followed. Why isn't this working? This is conflict resolution 101.
Hank MacLean back in the vault was by all accounts a great man and a charismatic leader. His third heart is still protecting dark secrets after murdering Shady Sands and his beloved baby mama, but he ultimately carries on. And this is what Lucy has been doing for the first 25 years-ish of her life, believing that her choices were ultimately her own.
My name is Lucy MacLean, and I'm an active contributor to the well-being of my community. Repair skills, Young Pipers Association, science skills, speech skills, teaching American history, gymnastics club, fencing team C, remediate phys ed, and I dabble in riflery. I enjoy taking walks and watching movies with my dad. Gardening, also with my dad. Still trying to get my brother on board. He'll come around when he's ready.
I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed making it. I hope the edits were sufficient to not send me to revision hell as I try to upload a version of this that passes the content ID system, which I can only assume is now AI because it's been much more militant about flagging everybody's videos. Sincerely, if you care about watching YouTube videos, please start paying attention to the creators dealing with more and more copyright issues. Something is going on twice now. For the last 2 videos, I have had to spend days, literally days of constant work after the video was made, doing edits, revisions, exporting and uploading the exact same video with tiny edits, trying to exist here with monetization. All of this is fair use, but I am now having to put serious strain on my network, on my computer, on my general existence, spending hours and hours brute forcing a system that does not account for me. It is painful. Please. But back to the story. This is Lucy when we meet her, accomplishing great things after returning to the vault at a young age. She is a contributing member of society. She's roughly 25, a proficient jack-of-all-trades type. She is educated, adored, and supported. And these are her official special traits as supported by Fallout Shelter. She is a well-rounded character, direct with what she wants.
So what's your sperm count?
While also being kind and empathetic to others.
You're a good person for not shooting me with that gun.
Huh. It was really no problem.
She is, by all accounts, a good person, but does have a sense of self that is quite assured. And while that's not inherently bad, it can lead to some pretty awkward situations. Later, we will see her speaking when she should be listening, giving advice when she should be learning, and overall just not completely understanding reality or the situation because the world that she has always known was so far removed.
Messing around with your cousin, it's all well and good for kids, but it's not a sustainable long-term sexual practice, you know?
The story starts with her telling this council all of this because she wants to find a partner. It is time for the triennial trade, which is a trade that happens every 3 years. I think this fact also helps us isolate when the turmoil started for Vault 32, since Vault 33 didn't know what was going on, and the dude was last alive 2 years ago. We have a range of about a year for Vault 32 to go from resource breeder trading cog to nothing, and nobody even knowing about it. Lucy is accepted, and I imagine this council is mostly for show, and we see her marriage application approved. This is a small detail that speaks to the Christian American ideology still having its claws in this society. They have been stunted and not allowed to develop naturally in this new space. The ceremony later shows the same, because why would she need to be married to have children? It's clearly viewed as the objective thing, right? It's why we're trading. It's a breeder for crops, even from Lucy's perspective. And having a child is the most important thing. So why make strangers marry at all when really it's just them doing the Texas two-step? And you could bring up things like stability or, anything that assumes a child to a married couple does better than a child without both parents. There are plenty of things right now that show that exact thing. As a product of divorce, like, damn, my life sucks, dude. But that is ultimately the Christian American ideology that I'm talking about still affecting this society. Them being assigned procreation partners is needed for the plan. Them being told a white wedding dress marriage is a requirement is societal dogma. That is what I'm ultimately trying to highlight. The first little bit of her story shows us a positive relationship with Steph. She is a friend through and through. It is really sweet, but then you remember that she is one of Bud's buds, and it's kind of just like it just seems like she was getting another person ready to be bred for his master plan. It changes the tone on rewatch. She was very open about sex, and it feels like, yeah, go woman, like, fuck whoever you want on first watch. Sex rocks. Let's talk about it. Period. Everybody, you listening, comment below right now. I'm just kidding. But her doing this may have been to make sure that Lucy was thinking solely about the Tululu Tango instead of love or a real relationship, because that falls to the wayside. They are on a schedule and they got to make it happen, sooner rather than later. It feels manipulative because we know that Steph has more information than she is sharing. And I wonder just how many brides had similar buildup to make sure they knew what they needed to be focusing on, serving a grander goal that they knew nothing about. We then see a beautiful set and an emotional father.
Gosh, you look just like your mother.
Yeah, I wish she was here.
Me too.
It was a nice moment, a father and daughter sharing a tender moment that just transcends time. Regardless of the circumstance, I believe this is real, and he does care for his child. I think it's like human nature too. We do see it in this first season, but I think as the series goes on, we will see him faced with decisions that challenge whether or not he loves his job or his child, and I think that has some real power to it. They make their way over to Vault 32, and after a brief moment of wonder, we see the bright, shining, neighborly faces. They discuss Overseer Jackson dying, the wheat blight, and then some other things that don't really matter for the Lucy timeline. What does matter, though, is considering Moldaver's plot. We know that Vault 31 was inaccessible from 32 because of what Norm had found, meaning the only way to access the other vaults is social engineering. We see this with Norm later sending the message about how things are going wrong in 33 to get access to 31, and again confirmed in this conversation when they say Moldaver sent word ahead of time to get the triennial trade ready and to inform them about the crops and the Overseer passing. We have some things to ponder here. Just how long has Moldaver been trying to get into this vault? We know that she had Rose's Pip-Boy, and that is how she accessed Vault 32 in the first place, like from the exterior vault door, but we don't know how she knew about the triennial trade in order to set up the one and only way that she could to access the other vaults. From this log here documenting when Rose's Pip-Boy was used, we see that the system tries to validate an emergency response certificate, it times out, and then it still authorizes access. To me, it's saying that the network is down, and something about this makes me really curious why Vault 31 didn't know and then inform Vault 33 that Vault 32 was offline in some capacity, or ultimately what happened. But I don't care to hark on that point. A program that tries to validate a certificate before performing an operation and then without the certificate still authorizes the operation is kind of a bad program. But I mean, that's Vault-Tec for you. This extra little detail just tells us they really are not good at creating things, and I kind of commend them for that. I talked before about what it could look like with Rose and Moldaver after the bombs went off in Shady Sands. Rose explaining the triennial trade sometime before she fully ghoulified has a nice ring to it. It's curious that it took 19 years from bomb drop to revenge plot and her standing here, but any number of things could explain why. Later, I also talk about, how she ultimately comes to Hank for the code, but we will get to that a little bit later. Rose's Pip-Boy could have also just been lost in Shady Sands, and the entire thing was contingent on finding that before they could do anything. But in the present day, Lucy is unaware, and she stands before her mother's possible lover and someone that she met as a child, having no idea. We then meet Monty, they get married, and then the air fills with an odd tension as we ponder how this wholesome moment will sour.
So what's your sperm count?
Hank gives a nice pretentious speech and drops the line about Lucy's children being able to recolonize the surface. I take this at face value, but it's fun to consider Bud's plot about waiting out the opposition never having a real end date. They just keep saying, well, a little bit later, a little bit more, we'll do it eventually. I don't know. Ultimately, though, Lucy is thriving. She is living in this moment. New relationship energy getting ramped up, and they do the Cuban shuffle.
Okie dokie.
Then, of course, her world meets reality. She fights off her new husband, she rejoins the fight with her friends and family, and barely survives the incursion. She sees a different side of her father, but doesn't think about it too much after just murdering a man. This brings us to the Gambit. Moldaver rounded up some Vault Dwellers, set some explosives, and ultimately, we get this line from Hank.
I think I know who you are.
Everyone knows who I am.
She threatens to kill either the group of Vault Dwellers or his daughter, and it's a good example of the moral dilemmas that are being tested. Right from the start, this is a major reoccurring theme throughout. Though the execution is kind of terrible because Lucy is safe and all of them escape. Either way, Lucy is now seeing parts of her father that beg more questions than anything. Hank is kidnapped and Lucy meets a well-intended mother lover, and then boom. Vault 33 is left with countless questions, but Lucy is very direct with what she wants. Open the door and find Dad. The other Vault Dwellers can't believe it, but she intends to do what needs to be done. Lucy creates a plan with Norm and Chet, and they sneak to the exterior vault door while everybody else cleans up the carnage of the raid. Chet was having some second thoughts about the plan and ended up getting drugged by Lucy. It's a great way to show the morally questionable things that she's readying herself to do. Also, perhaps, how the culture that we have established earlier impacts her decision-making. Normal people would have probably just had a discussion about whether or not two people venturing into the wasteland is better than one, but she tranks her 10-year cousin stuff lover boy with a bright smile on her face and threatens to do the same to her brother.
I'll do the same to you if you try to follow me.
I'm too chicken.
Lucy then leaves the vault, the world gets quiet, bones and bodies litter the exterior, and all she can do is start walking. It's a beautiful wasteland, all things considered, and we get a few shots to establish she walked quite a distance with no real direction. She gets remnants of the world, little teasers of how it exists now, with no real clue what any of it means until she comes to a lifeless house. She sees a dead family resting around a dinner table with Vault-Tec Plan D, likely consumed by all. It is the Econo savings package, and likely what was offered by Vault-Tec for those that could not afford a seat at the vault, but didn't want to die in worse ways. The scene does a great job of capturing the haunting things that you can find when you explore any Fallout game that are often built on these grand moral dilemmas. Is it more kind to preemptively kill your family with poison or let them suffer nuclear fallout until they inevitably, and in a much more painful way, reach the same fate?
Vault-Tec Plan D. It was the most humane product that Vault-Tec ever made. It was quick, painless, tasted like banana.
It's the first time that Lucy learns Vault-Tec may have been doing something morally questionable. She ultimately continues walking, she reaches night and creates an open campfire that she really shouldn't have had in the open, and that night, she is found by the ill-fated Ziggy Wilzig. He tries to warn her about the dangers ahead, and after realizing that she had no intention of returning to the vault, he journeys into night with a final note about her good intentions, wondering if she will still want the same thing after she is forced to adapt to the wasteland. This brings us to her meeting this man here.
Sorry, sir, I need that.
It was a brilliant moment to teach her to be less trusting and value water.
Somebody hands you a bottle of clean water and you drink it. Even if you're not thirsty, drink it.
He gives her directions to Philly, offers his hand in marriage, then yells out how good of a person she was for not shooting him right away. She does a rather kind thing here for the man that is terrified of the world. His family, his entire family died in Philly and may be dying himself. I would love if he reappears in season 2 and saves Lucy just because of her kindness kind of thing. It feels like that would be a cool Fallout kind of thing to do. I don't know. She continues walking and eventually enters the forest, green, lush things and people that carry on about their business without trouble.
My name...
The outskirts of Philly are surrounded by a lively culture of buying and selling goods. Nuka-Cola caps are the main currency post-Great War, and seemingly anything can be bought or sold. The big takeaway for Lucy is that it's just different than what she was expecting. It's more people than she thought, and I think it gives her some hope about finding her father. Surely someone must have seen him or known of someone named Moldaver, and this brings us to Ma June and the illustrious supply and rare item shop that she runs.
Safe to assume that you do business with criminals. Not judging you.
Lucy does not make a good impression and eventually gets laughed at. Mama June can't believe that she's a real vault dweller and then questions why anybody should care about the vaults at all.
We're going to save America.
And when exactly were you planning on saving America?
It's another little moment that really starts teaching Lucy the truth of the world and the people she has been told were the saviors of humanity since birth. When Moldaver gets addressed by name, Ma closes her book and is far more serious than she was 2 seconds ago. She says that everybody knows her name and refuses to give more information. Ma June does this because she is a part of her network and actively working to get Ziggy Wilzig to Moldaver. She gives Lucy a warning about staying here.
I can tell by looking at you. Clean hair, nice teeth, all 10 fingers. Must be nice.
Which is a really nice little foreshadow for the events to come as Lucy, again, must adapt along this journey. She eventually gets the hint and takes off, which is when Ziggy Wilzig shows up and all hell breaks loose. Cooper Howard is hunting him, and from Lucy's perspective is just a murderer that needs to be stopped, though she has a pretty thoughtful note about moral justifications of interacting in a culture she doesn't know.
Now, I acknowledge that I'm unfamiliar with your circumstances. At first glance, your treatment of this man appears unfair.
Maximus saves Lucy from getting a giant hole in her chest. In return, she accepts his quest to keep Ziggy safe until he can deal with Cooper. Her and Ma get him inside and replace his stump with a larger stump. Having no other options, they want Lucy's help, and the only reason she accepts is because he was already headed for Moldaver. She doesn't want to take on another challenge, but it is quite literally thrust upon her. Plus, it makes sense to use Ziggy as a way to get close to Moldaver, should she ever make it at all.
This could maybe work.
Lucy is then informed that Moldaver and her group are held up across the Shoothole.
She and her kind hole up across the shithole.
What's the shithole?
They start their journey across the barren wasteland that I can only assume cherishes that name. They walk for miles until his newfound foot is bloody and he knows that his time is limited.
You are going to get across that wasteland. That's a promise.
No, you see, I've just taken a cyanide pill.
I love how Lucy in these early scenes is being so rapidly humbled for every overly optimistic and out of touch thing that she says. It's highlighting the problem with the Vault system and believing that you can establish an objective moral system for all people. The theoretical rarely intersects with reality when you put yourself in an echo chamber and affirm your own beliefs. She's from a world of promises and offers that as comfort to a dying man that knows better than she does. The Vault dwellers are out of touch, and that is the point. The only way they could ever lead these people is if they were of the people and learned from them, existed with them. And I think depending on how Lucy's story plays out in later seasons, she still may be on that track to become a super manager of the world, as this is kind of her journey. She's becoming of the people here. You know, someone who will ultimately do the work that needs to be done and finds out the needs of the people. It feels like the perfect politician is being created. You know, someone who is educated, but also takes the time, purposefully or otherwise, to understand that their perspective is not the only one to consider. And I think that there's maybe something to run with there.
You, I could trust you. You are a Vault dweller. If you're going to survive You need to start acting like a surface dweller.
Ultimately, Ziggy dies, and she cannot believe that it's happening or that a person could so easily throw their life away like that. It is not emotional. He just knows that his time is up and takes the less painful path. After really trying to wrap her head around the insane task given, she eventually hears him. Get his head to Moldaver. She is still operating for her own personal goals, but I think this conversation and Ziggy's odd wealth of information about her also has her wanting to know more about his quest as well. But onward she goes.
Okie dokie.
Later that night, she finds the source of his secrets, the implant injected into his head. She has no idea the noble cause that she's actually working for at this moment as she stares at the formula destined for cold fusion for all people. Then she puts a tracker in his nose just in case anything goes wrong. I wish they would have shown her covering up the fire before it got too dark as a way to show that she is actively paying attention to what people are telling her. It seems like maybe it was cut for time, but this would have been perfect. She was even reflecting on their meeting that night and who he was and what he said.
I wonder who he was.
Seeing her put this fire out before the sun went down would be a great subtle way to show growth, but I'm willing to bet that it happened and it was just cut for time. She eventually makes it to this flooded plain, one of my favorite sets from the first season, and meets Mother Nature. This is a gulper, and he is hungry. The beast takes her pack, the head included, and really was just the most misunderstood character in this first season. My personal thought, with no evidence, is that the gulper here was probably part of an underwater scientific community researching renewable energy, and this was their big break. Again, no evidence for this, but it's now canon, thank you. The bulk of the scene was action, and the tracker proving to be a good choice immediately. The gulper, with a husband and 2 children at home, was on its way to let them know that their prayers were answered, and they didn't have to worry about anything ever again. Lucy then readies herself to dive into the radioactive water and fight a giant mutant creature. Before her great idea can be realized, the ghoul kindly interrupts.
Where is it?
It's not long before he realizes what happens and helps relocate the head in the most direct way possible. Lucy isn't a fan, but it is the most direct way possible. Lucy and Cooper have a conversation about her quest to find Dad, how his actions are immoral, and finally how this isn't actually torture, it's fishing.
I'm using you as bait.
It eventually fails, and we get this wonderful line from Lucy.
You can't treat people like this!
Yeah, why's that?
Because of the golden rule.
Her golden rule isn't Cooper's, which means that it's not a golden rule at all. In fact, it doesn't apply to most of the people alive. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you is the golden rule. And the golden rule is kind of a foundation for most moral beliefs. It's a simplified version of the categorical imperative, and it's included in most religions. So what the writing is actually saying here is that they aren't in a place that allows for morality. Morality comes after survival. And the cold, hard truth of this world is that everybody is still fighting for survival. It makes her father's actions against Shady Sands much more insidious. It was becoming civilization again, and part of that are the calm moments where you can talk about how we treat each other. Hank MacLean didn't just kill people, he killed morality for everybody else that remained living. Who knows how any of these people that Lucy met along the way would have behaved if Shady Sands was still operation and the conversation about how to treat each other was more relevant than a conversation about finding drinkable water or food or a place to sleep without fear. During this struggle, Cooper's stash of chems gets broken, and to stop himself from turning feral, he needs to fix that ahead of anything else. The gulper has a slow digestion, so he binds Lucy and starts marching her across the wasteland, heading for a super duper mark. Along the way, they continue talking about what it means to survive this place and eventually stumble upon another ghoul actively resisting the virility process. His name is Roger, and he was also after the bounty for Ziggy, but something went wrong. He needs chems now, and Lucy broke all of Cooper's, so Roger now gets none. It's a stark look at the effects of her actions, and like I talked about in the Cooper-Howard breakdown, the ghoul shows some real humanity here. Roger dies with a smile on his face, and the final thought was about his mother's pie, while Lucy tries to wrap her head around a world where that is the best thing that anybody could have done for him. And then again, she tries to advise a situation that she knows nothing about and asks one of the most disrespectful questions possible.
How do you live like this?
Why keep going?
Which is such a privileged, disgusting question. She is pretty close to saying that she would kill herself if she was him. She views him harvesting the dead ghoul's body as being drastically removed from humanity or civility because of her protected life of plenty. So the bulk of the world that still fights to survive, let alone the norms about being a ghoul, this is humanity. And the most civil thing you can do is not let the resources go to waste. So it's time to educate her.
Why the fuck am I doing all the work?
He makes her burn the calories that he would have making ass jerky, and then we come to them trading fingers, you know, for funsies.
That right there is the closest thing we've had to an honest exchange so far.
I want to highlight how heavily this leans into that eye for an eye mindset that once dominated as the golden rule. This was once honesty, true justice even, and it seems like they are implicitly telling us that this rules again in abundance. Either way, she marches onward to the super duper mart in near mint condition so that she can be traded for chems.
2 months supply of owls, exchange 1 female, mint condition. Near mint condition.
She unwillingly enters, but is comforted to know that she isn't going to be a sex slave. That relief then immediately fades as Snip Snip tries to harvest her organs instead, as one does. All of her skills from before coming in clutch as she disables the robot and commandeers its syringe gun. The two idiocracy knuckleheads eventually do what she wants, and that sense of self that I talked about before puts her immediately into another fight for her life. She eventually leaves the store and drops some vials off for Cooper, intending to treat people better than they treat her. I think that has real power and is the cornerstone of her storyline, seeing if her morals can survive reality and how you always be a good person, even if the world is not good to you.
Golden rule, motherfucker.
This, of course, brings us to Maximus. He was left in the dark after being vulnerable with another man. Rad Roach's ready for some fine dining, and all he can do is pray for an angel. Then one appears. She saves him and helps him remove his armor. Her ability to trust strangers is still intact despite the odds, though it required making a deal. She lets him out in exchange for Radaway. The wasteland is already making its mark on her despite her best intentions.
Believe me, I really want to trust you, but I've had a rough week.
Both of these characters have gotten themselves into a predicament they are not quite prepared for, and while I will be covering Maximus in his own video, it's important to know that he is lying to Lucy about his true identity, and this lie is how their friendship starts. Lucy passes out and wakes up to a Radaway drip without any further damage to herself or her possessions being stolen, meaning that she knew that she could trust him. He could have left her for dead, like all of the other people she had met along the way probably would have, and because of this, she offers to take him to the head. He can have the head if they will use the strength of the Brotherhood to rescue her father. It is a mutually beneficial exchange, and they march onward. The tracker directs them as they walk and talk about the last 200 years. We get some nice dialogue about the bombing of Shady Sands happening when he was a child.
Is that what they tell you in your Brotherhood?
And they discuss how crazy her plan was. You can't just walk up to a warlord with the item they're after and start making demands. This is Fallout, and she's kind of being a silly goose right now.
That's true.
She also shares more of her childhood, and that's where we get this line that we've referenced before.
Up until I was 6, I really thought that the big light on our farm was the sun.
They eventually come to this bridge, and we have this tense moment that shows how hard it is to operate in a world that can't trust each other.
You armed? No! Are you armed? No.
Both parties cannot trust each other because they are both lying. Lucy tries to handle the situation, and it feels like her unique skill set and stunted morality are finally making a positive impact until it doesn't. She cannot believe it and questions why, but the cold hard truth is she probably would have been killed if it were not for Maximus.
I hate it up here.
They eventually make it to Shady Sands, and she learns that her vault's reclamation day was not everybody's reclamation day.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, it didn't work out.
It's hard for her to believe this existed, and even harder to believe another nuclear event wiped it out. Of course, we know this was her father's doing. Indirectly, her being here caused the death of his entire family, as well as everybody else that was thriving together, and they stand before the mass grave of what could have been. No words doing justice for the depth of humanity's cruelty. He talks about surviving this moment, and then Lucy realizes that he had been shot in the exchange earlier. He will die if he does not get help, and they stumble into the best trap humanly possible while searching for medical supplies. The two wake up when they just as easily couldn't have, and that uneasy feeling persists in Maximus. Lucy is quick to trust, but Maximus knows better. At least he thinks he does. After getting the rotten tooth bullet removed from his arm and Lucy learns more about the vault, they sit and talk through quarantine. They quickly realize that they want to bone, and then Lucy educates him on the standard operating procedure of boners. He really has no clue, and if anything can highlight how good of a person Lucy is this. She doesn't have a critical thought about this man. She doesn't judge him. She doesn't want to humiliate him. She just realizes how mistaken he was and smiles while educating him in a way that isn't condescending.
You know, when they make it move, it gets all big and hard like a big pimple, and then it pops.
That's actually completely normal. It happens all the time. Every time. Ideally.
The next time we see them, they're eating together, and Maximus is stressing about how friendly everybody in the vault is. He calls it immediately. It is a cult, but of course it's not like either of them understand. Suddenly, the Overseer comes into frame telling them not to access level 12, and the feeling shifts. His mutant appearance is off-putting, but it really serves to show how judgmental they are being by the end of it. The mutants are the native vault dwellers, the quote-unquote normal people are the refugees, and we see the natives having to cover themselves while we watch two refugees try and pretend they aren't freaked out by the natives' appearance. It very quickly establishes a culture here, and then it continues with the Overseer as he explains he's a good person, but he really wishes the refugees would stop with their smelly food and their weird customs, one of which we see later. It's a really interesting scene with noted depth, and it's fun to consider if he is a good person for his actions or a bad person for his words, mainly highlighting that it is not binary and you can be a great person, but if you don't stop making 9/11 jokes on Twitter, the next generation will cancel you.
What was the joke?
I forget. All I know is it was a huge bomb. She doesn't get it.
This is also when Lucy gets her true name.
Nope. It says Goosey.
She then asks about floor 12 directly, and the meeting comes to an abrupt end. After exploring for a bit, she tags along to a Vault Dweller custom that the natives aren't too fond of, but they make space for anyway.
Excuse me. What's going on?
It's a surface dweller tradition. It can get a little rambunctious for my taste.
It's also when she realizes that Maximus was right. This is a cult of sorts, but kind of like a cool cult, you know, like a really cool cult. If anybody is interested in getting together and doing this, I'm in Austin, Texas. Let me know. I'm not trying to go full like, oh God, they're starting a cult in Austin, Texas, like where we dance around naked and praise giant pictures of hotties, but like more casual, same goal, just much more casual. Lucy eventually realizes the cult is worshipping Moldaver, and let me just say I have no idea why. Her backstory and the...
I take it you know who she is?
Everyone knows who Moldaver is.
Still needs to be fleshed out in this series. She has some wicked influence, and it really feels like she is a liberal socialist, and like this is how people that are not believe they act, like it's satire, right? Like a bunch of liberals dancing around naked to praise a person trying to create things that benefit society above individual interest. It just feels like that's on track. That's kind of the vibe I'm taking away, and I love it. Lucy eventually makes it back to Maximus and realizes that he is completely drinking all of the Kool-Aid.
Called oysters? You want one? You want to make my cock explode now? Sorry, intercourse?
So she goes to investigate floor 12 all by herself. She finds the early days of the vault and the experiments that led to the mutations that she sees now. She is eventually discovered breaking one of the only rules that exist here and gets captured.
Your entire culture is insane!
I'm sure if we came to your home, we would say the same thing.
The writing in these scenes is doing some heavy lifting. It highlights the judgmental nature of the ignorant Lucy while building tension that she needs to consider what dark truths hide inside of her own vault. What could be found that from the outside would be insane? Of course, we know the secrets ahead, but this is one of those moments. She has no clue the extent of danger that comes with Vault-Tec, and she needs to learn if she wants to have any hope of being the good person that she wants to be.
What was the experiment in 33?
Well, there is no experiment.
Lucy is eventually taken for punishment. They have very few rules, and most relate to pooping, and she managed to break into the forbidden section of the library while also assaulting the residents working there. It has to be dealt with.
You are hereby sentenced to death.
Of course, the scene is meant to highlight an execution, but it's for the comedy of it, the bathos. She is being kicked out of the vault, and while that is what she wants, it is also the ultimate punishment. The wasteland sucks, but they restock her supplies to survive for 2 weeks because they are truly good people, touching again on this theme of crime and punishment. Lucy then speaks up for Maximus here, acknowledging how much he would benefit from a stable and loving environment. This, of course, is when Maximus, our lovable loser, comes in to save the day.
Stop! They're letting me go.
Really?
He obliterates the supplies, believing Lucy was in danger, steals the fusion core from the vault to make it happen, which, I mean, who hasn't done that? And then after realizing his mistake, they make it out safely, but the damage is done. The fusion core is the only thing on Lucy's mind after they exit, and this is a great way to show how Lucy is a good person. Them having the fusion core would benefit her needs directly, but the cost is another group dealing with hardship. It's selfless to return the core, and after convincing Maximus, a wastelander who has lived by a much different code for his entire life, that the vault needs it more than they do, selfless they are.
You really want to give them their fusion core back if it means you don't get your dad?
Her moral code is still intact and shows us that, after all,
Because out here, it's just you, your gun, and your personal code, bringing order to the wild, wild west.
Maximus and Lucy have another little chat, and she really puts her feelings out there. She is interested in him, and we know this is directly because he is choosing to be a good person here and being much more vulnerable together rather than hurting others to get ahead.
You are the best stranger that I've ever met. You're a good person.
She is love-struck by someone doing the bare minimum, and I commend the show for capturing what dating feels like in 2024. He reveals the lie about his identity and about how he watched the previous night die to get ahead. She treats his vulnerability with compassion and assures him above all else, and it turns into a soft and beautiful moment.
The wasteland sucks.
Yeah, sometimes.
I love this line. He is absolutely falling in love with her and seeing good in the world, in the wasteland, because it brought them together. This right here, great writing, such a good moment. She asserts that she wants him to come live with her after everything is said and done, and I think he really wants that as well.
Do you want to come live with me in my vault?
Yeah, of course.
They continue onward, marching until they find the man with the head. What's left of Ziggy has been on an adventure since Lucy lost it to the Gulper, and the tracking device inserted into the nose was thankfully the best thing she could have done. This man is Thaddeus. Of course, I'm sure everybody knows this, but this is a character from Maximus's backstory that doesn't really need any attention in a Lucy video. Overall, he has just been turned into a ghoul, feels sorry for bullying Maximus, and gives up the head to escape the Brotherhood's cruel execution of ghouls, as right now they're barreling towards them. Thaddeus escapes, Maximus makes a plan, and Lucy leaves with the real head, hoping to go to a warlord's den and simply make demands like she wanted to in the first place. Maximus goes with the Brotherhood to buy her some more time, and we come to the Griffith Observatory? Griffith? It's on the screen. She enters peacefully, and we see a world protected and thriving. The new California Republic is trying to start again, but the military presence exists as a stark reminder that any haven needs to be protected. They do not intend to lose their home again. Lucy is finally face to face with Moldaver. She sees her father in a cage, Shady Sands blown to bits in the background, and a feral ghoul that she will soon learn to be her mother at the dinner table.
I'm gonna keep things civil.
Lucy's grand speech highlights how the wasteland could have changed her, but she believes that it didn't. She didn't come here with a plan of violence, but on goodwill. She completed an incredibly difficult task for Moldaver, and now Moldaver should return the favor. But this brings up Moldaver's goals entirely. Why did she kidnap her father? Lucy agrees to let her monologue despite Hank hoping that she would not listen, and by the end of it, Well, of course, we know what happens. Moldaver's plot is quite interesting. She needed both Ziggy Wilzig, an Enclave employee, and a member of the Vault-Tec team to activate the password-protected tech. It's curious to consider when she discovered some of these things and how it relates to...
Everyone knows who Moldaver is.
I think I know who you are.
Everyone knows who I am.
It seems like she was just a force to be reckoned with on the surface, and after finding out the Enclave somehow turned her pre-Great War research into the actual technology, and it was somehow locked behind a Vault-Tec passcode, she created this plan.
So only a trusted Vault-Tec minion can activate cold fusion.
That equation still has a ton of missing variables, but it's what we know right now. I'm hoping that Season 2 fills in some of the gaps and maybe highlights how Vault-Tec and the Enclave are working together, or any number of things to explain how they got the research in the first place. I'm imagining Ziggy passionately working on the research core project and ultimately finding out that the information was stolen from a person who is somehow still alive and realizes that she's trying to create a government that puts people first. You know, something worth dying to get away from the Enclave and back to its author. But ultimately, just a theory. We don't know how this whole thing really started and what sparked the plan to obtain both the research and the passcode that they needed that has ultimately led us here. We just know that Lucy was instrumental in bringing the research here, and then after everything was laid out, was the one who made her father give up the passcode so that it could be activated.
Give her the code.
In some ways, this was the daughter paying for the sins of her father, but I wouldn't call that debt paid just yet. It is a heartbreaking moment for Hank as his dark secrets spill for the daughter he was committing those crimes to protect. He is then forced to betray Vault-Tec to make his daughter happy and give up the code, but I don't think happy is exactly the right word here either. Learning what he did to Shady Sands could be irredeemable to Lucy. He is her father, but he gave her the moral compass that now points away from him, and Lucy has to figure out what that means. Again, an ongoing theme this season is crime and punishment.
It doesn't matter where you come from or what you believe. You deserve safety. Unless you threaten that peace.
Lucy, wanting to be a good person, understands the delicate balance, but like we see in the vault with the Raiders, at some point, it's still just an eye for an eye. How could she call herself a good person and let him go unpunished? Is she in any position to tell Moldaver that this treatment isn't just for the crimes that he's committed? And equally, how could she not throw away all of that logical thinking when it's your own father facing his demise? Some part of this also dives into that morality coming after survival concept that I spoke about before. Like, your family can be an extension of yourself, and humanity is inherently social. To accept that your dad needs to pay is to accept that your chances of survival go down. It's hard to battle with. It's hard to just be good. And still, by the end of this, she knows that her father must answer for what he has done. If we were to judge him by the same standard of this modern morality that Lucy exists with, the crime of this magnitude could only be paid with his life. I think the most exciting twist that could happen here is if all or some of this was a lie by Moldaver to get what she wanted from Lucy and Hank, and Hank swearing that he didn't do this was actually, you know, him telling the truth.
I did what was necessary to save our people. She is no different than me.
It would be quite unexpected, but we are assuming much about the time between him stealing the children back to when the city was blown up. We have years to account for here. He may not have pushed the big red button and simply told what happened to Vault-Tec when questioned why the doors were opened at all. Then they fired the nuke because, like Moldaver says,
that's how Vault-Tec deals with competition, just like they did 200 years ago.
In fact, I think that's likely, and we just have to decide if he is still on the hook for damn near genociding Shady Sands, even though he may not have wanted to harm anybody and just wanted his children back. He could have been a concerned father more than the omega villain he ends as, and I think that gray area character is exactly what they will continue building in Season 2. It's a better character with a ton of depth, and while it can be overused in the last few things that I've reviewed, I think I've been a little critical of it. I feel like here, it makes a lot of sense. All in all, the truth is out. Moldaver gets what she wants, and then the Brotherhood attacks while Hank tries, pleads, begs for his daughter to understand his actions.
I believe, Lucy. I know I made the right choice.
Now, the Brotherhood is after the head, but because the head contains the cold fusion destined to be delivered to all people, it's curious to know who really sent them on this operation and why. It seems like whomever issued the bounty for all of these different groups to go find Ziggy has the money to spend, and it will be enough to make one person or group incredibly powerful compared to all of the others. And to me, that means that the powers that be are still the powers that were, and Vault-Tec is now offering bottle caps instead of dollars so that the people capture a bounty for selfish gains and not realize the good that limitless power could do for everybody. They may not even know what this means aside from being a really good fusion core, right? Vault-Tec continues upholding this superior, untouchable, even unseen status. And if we're considering how Vault-Tec is in a better place than they were pre-Great War, because, that's the whole point, it's this, right? Like, they aren't competing for survival. They aren't part of the rat race anymore. There is no competition. They are, out of the equation. I'm imagining them somewhere nice, perhaps an island, completely out of danger, and laughing that they have reduced humanity to fight over bottle caps while they worry so little about survival. Probably chuckling that they also convinced people to live like rats inside of vaults this entire time as well. As the seasons go on, it will be interesting to know how Vault-Tec benefited from doing all that they did. If they aren't on a Westworld island living however they want, so far disconnected from humanity that they aren't concerned with survival or even morality at that point, I don't know what the point would be. It seems like the only other likely thing is that they are all dead and the original plan failed, which I think is very likely as well. Imagine ending the world for your perfect existence and then you die because you failed or stumped your toe or something, right? That seems like a pretty Fallout story. But regardless of how all of Fallout ends, the Brotherhood makes their way into the depths of the observatory, fighting an unexpected third party, while Hank details how all conflict stems from people putting themselves into factions and begging her to open the door. That his ideology says, we put an end to factions and we are good. Maximus reunites with Lucy and lets Hank out before she can explain that he is the reason that Maximus doesn't have any parents anymore. Hank suits up while they are having this tender moment and then knocks out Maximus. Lucy holds a gun on her father, debating what should be done, when a shot from Cooper Howard comes out of nowhere.
You want another autograph, young Henry?
Cooper is here for only one reason, and that is to find out where his family is. In my Cooper Howard video, of course, we dive much more into that. If you haven't seen that, go check that out. But ultimately, he lets Hank escape so that he can be tracked. Lucy questions it at first, but quickly understands why. She tries to wake up Maximus, but must leave him behind as the Brotherhood closes in. Instead, she mercy kills her mother and agrees to go after the people most responsible for the state of the world.
You coming?
Talking about the Vault-Tec company in general, or the people that were at this table, or who is ultimately in charge of the decision making that led to the status that they are in right now. And I think next season we'll probably be looking at West-Tec or Robco as kind of the big bad that we explore in season 2 as we go into New Vegas. Lucy tags along with Cooper as we see them in Hollywood looting houses with a pup that Ziggy kept safe and protected and loved. It's interesting that his influence is still here, and I have high hopes for this party of two, though the journey will certainly test both of them before this is over. In terms of the long-term stories going on here, it's interesting to think that if the vault was to open in her children's generation, like Hank had said earlier, Lucy would have been one of the super managers that they were trying for. Of course, things go wrong, but this may still be happening. Like, she rejoined the world and is actively influencing it. Everything that makes her her was created by Vault-Tec plotting. And if you watched my Cooper Howard video, you know it's possible to say the same about him too. They think they are breaking the cycles here and working to stop the big bads. But specifically with Lucy, her entire story is about the morality of all of these situations. That golden rule that she swears by, that she believes is moral, good, and right, is a product of Vault-Tec, and it's only here because of Vault-Tec. And I wonder if this will ever come back to bite Lucy in the butt, as she really thinks that she is out here doing good things, but could still be doing their bidding in some kind of underlying way. But with that, we come to the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed this video as I enjoyed making it. And again, I'm so sorry that it took so long. I was dealing with a breakup IRL. She told me that I couldn't, just talk about Fallout for 23 hours of a day, and it was a deal breaker. Okay. Also, I'm probably dealing with revision hell. And if you're watching this, put a little thing in chat saying, yeah, go Hacks Dogma, you beat the algorithm again. Because ultimately I'm just trying to share this with ad revenue because I'm pretentious and I believe that I should be paid for my hard work. YouTube, looking at you, YouTube. Also, every copyright content company that, is super militant and starts flagging everybody's videos because you think that, what is clearly fair use on so many videos is somehow something you're entitled to. Piece of but if you want to support this channel, the simplest way is to like and comment and subscribe. The YouTube algorithm is a beast, is a Cthulhu god. And when you like, when you comment, when you subscribe, it is basically you making a sacrifice, the equivalent of a human sacrifice, I would say, to let Cthulhu god YouTube know that you think that I'm pretty neat. And so maybe Cthulhu YouTube god would also think I'm neat as well. If you want to do a little bit more, head over to Patreon or become a member on YouTube with your real life bottle caps. Next up will be the Severance videos all the way until season 2 when that comes out, and I will be covering season 2 weekly, I hope. Hopefully this year as well. I will also be creating a Maximus video to complete the series. Also, I'm still thinking about a Norm video. Let me know what you think about that. If you made it this far in the video, I guess I am doing something right. Please let me know what that is, because it kind of feels great reading those comments and getting feedback from our community. Also, anything that I can improve on, what you want to see, what you don't want to see. Ultimately, I think I've talked enough though. Future me, have so much fun editing this for the next month. Much love, and I cannot wait to talk to you all again soon.
Just roll it up, pressing, double cup it, don't bend. Finish school, I recommend. Switch it up like suspend, like I'ma win in the end, like I'ma spin in the bin, like where the fuck you been? Pin like a wind in the arm, and they spin again. Not Kenneth Finnegan, up next a pin again. Not you at B pin, as in the end, genuine. Done with y'all fun, then God first.